My name is Rachel Dunham. I'm 30 years old. When I was 21, my mother set a plate of pot roast in front of me, waited until I'd taken exactly one bite, and told me they were giving my law school money to my sister. $92,000. Money my grandmother put away for me before I could even read. Money with my name on the paperwork. My mother folded her hands and said, "Honey, you've always landed on your feet." My father didn't look up from his plate. He just said, "Katie needs it more than you do." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't slam a single door. I said one word. "Okay." Then I stood up, hugged my mother, told her I loved her, and I meant it, and I walked up 14 carpeted stairs to my old bedroom. I sat on a comforter I'd had since 9th grade. And I waited. At 8:47 that night, my phone lit up in my lap. Unauthorized login attempt detected. My father was in the study, directly under my feet, trying to get into that account while I was still under his roof. While the dishes were still soaking. While my mother was wiping down the counter and humming. Here's what he didn't know. 6 weeks earlier, I'd already moved every last dollar. Legally. Quietly. Permanently. And I'd locked him out of it so completely that he could have sat at that desk until sunrise and never gotten past the front door. But that's not even the part that broke me. Because 3 months later, I requested 16 years of transaction records, every deposit, every withdrawal, every note somebody typed into a memo line, and I found something nobody in that family ever expected me to find. $14,720. Gone. Taken in pieces. Spread out over 12 years. Labeled with my name and my needs on paperwork I never signed and never saw. Before I tell you how I used one line of Illinois law to shut my own father out of my future, and how 8 years later, all 3 of them sat across a coffee shop table from me and asked me to forgive them, do me one favor. Drop a comment and tell me what city you're watching from right now. I read every single one of them, and I want to know how far this story travels. And stay with me, because near the end I'm going to show you the exact document my grandmother signed in 2003 that made all of this possible. 1 page, 1 paragraph, 1 notary stamp, and I'm going to explain why the wording on that page could protect somebody you love. Because what happened at that table changed absolutely everything. It was Sunday, September 17, 2017. I remember the date because I'd written it on a legal pad 3 days earlier with 2 words underneath it. Be ready. I was 3 weeks into my first semester at Northwestern Law. 3 weeks of drowning politely. Everybody in that building seemed to have a plan, a mentor, a father who golfed with a judge. I had a used laptop, a highlighter habit, and a bank account I'd been guarding like a woman guards a match in a rainstorm. That morning my mother called me at 9:40 in the morning. "Rach, honey. Can you come home for dinner tonight? Your dad and I want to talk to you about something. Katie's going to be here too. Now listen. I want you to understand something about my family. We didn't fight. We never fought. We were the kind of family that smiled through everything. My mother could tell you the worst news of your life in the same voice she used to ask if you wanted more green beans. So when she said we want to talk to you about something, and when she said Katie's going to be here too, I knew. I knew the way you know a storm's coming by the color of the sky. Not from any one thing. From all of it. The drive from my apartment in Evanston out to Naperville was 51 minutes with no traffic. That day it took me 1 hour and 10, and I don't remember a single mile of it. What I do remember is the folder. Navy blue. 2 inches thick. Sitting on my passenger seat under a jacket like something I'd have to explain to a cop. Inside it was every piece of paper that mattered, and I'd put it together over 11 weeks, 1 document at a time, in a public library on Ogden Avenue because I didn't trust the printer at school. I'd rehearsed what was coming 100 times. In the shower. On the train. Lying awake at 2 in the morning listening to my upstairs neighbor's dog. And every single time I rehearsed it, I heard the same sentence in my head. A text my mother had sent me 6 weeks earlier, on the 2nd of August, and I'm quoting it exactly. "That money is for this family, sweetheart. We take care of each other. That's what love is. That's what love is. I've thought about that sentence more than any other sentence anyone has ever said to me. I've said it out loud in courtrooms. I've written it on a whiteboard in front of law students. Because that is the trap right there, in 9 words. That's the whole machine. They don't take from you by force. They take from you by making the taking sound like devotion. I pulled into the driveway at 4:52 in the afternoon. The leaves were down early that year. They crunched under my tires exactly the way they did when I was 15 and learning to park in that driveway with my dad standing in the garage waving his arms. Katie's Corolla was parked at that angle she always parked at, half on the grass, like the driveway was a suggestion. I sat in my car for maybe 30 seconds. I looked at that house. Blue shutters. Storm door with the crack in the bottom corner nobody ever fixed. The porch light on, even though it was still daylight out. I want you to remember that porch light. It's going to matter. I said one sentence out loud to nobody. 2 words. Not tonight. Then I got out of the car and I went in and I hugged my mother like a daughter who didn't know anything. She smelled like she always smelled. That drugstore perfume in the frosted bottle she'd been wearing since before I was born, mixed with pot roast and onions and something baking. There she is, she said. Law school hasn't killed you yet. Not yet. Katie was on the couch with her legs curled under her, and she'd been crying. You could tell. Her nose was pink and her eyes had that swollen shine. She was 5 months along. You could see it now. She stood up and hugged me sideways, the way pregnant women hug, and she said, "Hi, Ratch," in this small voice that didn't sound like her. My dad wasn't in his chair. That was the thing that got me. My father sat in that recliner every Sunday of my entire childhood with a newspaper he never actually read. And he wasn't in it. He was standing in the kitchen doorway with his arms folded, and he nodded at me like I was a coworker. Dinner started at 6:15. For 25 minutes we talked about absolutely nothing. The bears. My mother's knee. A neighbor's new fence. The kind of conversation where everybody's chewing louder than they need to. At 6:40, I noticed Katie's ring was gone. She'd been engaged since Valentine's Day. Cody had proposed at a Cubs game and she'd posted about it 11 times. And her hand was bare, and there was a pale band of skin where the ring had been, and nobody said anything about it. At 6:58, my father set down his fork. He didn't set it down loud. He set it down the way a man sets down a tool when the job's finished. "Rachel," he said. "We need to talk to you about the money." And my mother reached across the table and took Katie's hand. I want you to understand, that's the image I still see. 8 years later. My mother's hand on my sister's hand. And me on the other side of the table with nothing on my hand at all. Your sister's 5 months along, my father said. Cody got laid off at the plant in July. The wedding's off, at least for now. She's going to need help. He looked at me then. Right at me. We've decided to move your education fund over to Katie. Not we'd like to. Not what do you think? We've decided. The money your grandma left, he said. It's $92,000 and change now. That covers her medical, gets her set up, gets the baby a room. You're already in the door at Northwestern. You can take loans like everybody else does. You can work. Northwestern Law was $64,000 a year at the time. Just tuition. Not housing. Not books. Not eating. He knew that number. He'd asked me for it in June, and I'd told him, and I remember being touched that he asked. That's the part that still gets me. He asked me for that number so he could look me in the eye and tell me it didn't matter. Then my mother started talking, and this is where it got surgical. Sweetheart, you've always been so capable. Since you were little. You never needed us the way Katie needed us. You figure things out. That's a gift, Rachel. That's a real gift. You've always landed on your feet. There it is. The sentence. The one they'd been saying to me since I was 7 years old. And I want to say something to whoever's listening to this right now, because I know some of you have heard your own version of that sentence. You're the strong one. You're so independent. You don't need as much. That is not a compliment. That is a bill. They're not praising you. They're explaining why you're going to be the one who pays. You can work part-time, my mother said. Take the federal loans. Honestly, honey, it builds character. Character. $92,000, and she handed me character in exchange. Katie was crying openly by then. I'm so sorry, Ratch. I didn't ask for this. I swear I didn't ask. And here's the thing about my sister. She didn't ask. That was true. She never once asked. But she never said no either. Not one single time in 21 years. She'd cry, and she'd apologize, and she'd take it, and then she'd hug me at Christmas. And while she cried, I sat there and I did math in my head. Not new math. Old math. A ledger I'd been keeping since I was 9 years old. The car she wrecked in 2007. $6,400. The semester at Illinois State she quit in November. $19,100. The wedding deposit in 2014 for a wedding that never happened. $9,000 even. Every single time, the same 2 sentences. Word for word. Like a prayer they dememorized. Katie needs help. Rachel will be fine. I stood up. And I want to be honest with you, because I think the honest version is more useful than the satisfying version. I did not have some cinematic moment. My hands were shaking under the table. My throat had closed up so tight I wasn't 100% sure sound was going to come out. But I'd rehearsed one word for 11 weeks. And it came out clean. Okay. The silence that followed was the single most satisfying silence of my entire life. Because they had prepared. You could see it. They had a whole second act loaded, the guilt, the volume, the after everything we've done for you. My father had his shoulders set for a fight. And I just handed them nothing to push against. My mother recovered first. She always did. Oh, sweetheart. Her whole face went soft and wet. Thank you. Thank you for understanding. I told your father, I said Rachel's going to understand, she's always been the mature one, can I be excused? I said. I've got about 90 pages of reading for tomorrow. Katie stood up. Thank you, Ratch. I'm going to pay you back. I mean it. Every dollar, I swear to God. I didn't answer her. I couldn't. If I'd opened my mouth right then, 11 weeks of work would have come out of it. My mother came around the table and hugged me. And here's the part that I still can't fully explain to people. It was a good hug. It was warm and real, and she held onto the back of my head the way she did when I was small and had a fever. She whispered, I love you, sweetheart. And I said, I love you too, Mom. And I meant it. I need people to hear that. I meant it. I still mean it. Loving somebody and letting them take from you are 2 completely different things, and the reason so many of us get destroyed is that we were taught they're the same thing. They are not. You can love a person all the way down to the bone and still lock the door. I went up those stairs slow. 14 of them. The 7th one's always creaked since 2004. I stopped at the top outside my old room. The doorknob was still loose. It had been loose since I was 11 and my dad said he'd fix it that weekend. I went in. I closed the door. I turned the little button lock. And that click was the loudest sound in that house. I sat down on the edge of that bed with the faded comforter and I pulled up the app on my phone. Balance, $92,447.19. I said it out loud to an empty bedroom. 3 words. This is mine. And for the first time in 21 years of being alive, that sentence was true. Not just on paper. Everywhere. If you've ever been the responsible one, the kid who never got the crisis, never got the rescue, never got the porch light left on, type, "I understand," in the comments right now. I want to see how many of us are out there. I think it's more than anybody realizes. Because in 9 minutes, my father was going to sit down at his desk and find out exactly what I'd done. The first alert came at 8:47 p.m. My phone buzzed against my leg and I about jumped out of my skin. Sign-in attempt from an unrecognized device. Windows desktop. Naperville, Illinois. That was the house. That was the desktop computer in the study with the wobbly chair, 10 feet below where I was sitting. And I could hear him. That's what nobody believes when I tell this story. I could hear him. That house was built in 1978 and the floors were paper. I heard the chair roll. I heard him typing, slow at first, 2 fingers, confident. Then stopping. Then typing faster. I heard him mutter something. Then my mother's voice from the kitchen, muffled. "Ray? What are you doing in there?" "Nothing. Passwords not taking." I sat in the dark on that comforter and I smiled. And I'm not going to pretend it was a nice smile. Second alert. 8:49, failed sign-in attempt. 2 of 3. The typing stopped completely. Long pause. Then the chair scraped back hard enough that I felt it through the floor. Footsteps. Heavy ones. Heading toward the stairs. My heart was going about 140 and I did not move 1 inch. I counted his steps out loud in my head. 1, 2, 3, 4. He stopped. Then he went back. And the typing started again, and this time it was slower, and I could hear him spelling something out to himself under his breath. My mother again, closer now, sharper. "Ray. What is going on?" Third alert. 8:51 and change. Account locked. Too many failed attempts. Access restricted for 24 hours. And then I heard my father say a word I had heard him say maybe 4 times in my entire life. "It locked me out." "What do you mean it locked you out?" "It says the account's restricted." "I'll call them." It was 8:53 on a Sunday night. Customer service closed at 8. He called anyway. I heard the automated menu through the floor, that flat robot voice, and I heard him pressing numbers harder and harder like the buttons had personally wronged him. And then, and I will hear this until the day I die, I heard my mother say, quietly, "Ray. Isn't Rachel the account holder now? Since her birthday?" 5 full seconds of nothing. Then my father's voice came up through that floor, and it was different. It wasn't loud. It was cold. I'd never heard him sound like that. "She's the what?" Something hit the desk. Papers, I think. Then a chair went over. Then he screamed my name up that staircase loud enough to rattle the storm door. "Rachel. Get down here. Right now." I stood up. I smoothed the front of my jeans. I walked to the door. And I counted to 10. Slowly. All the way to 10. Because I had learned something in the 11 weeks I'd spent getting ready for that night, and it's the single most useful thing I know: the calmest person in the room is the person running the room. Then I opened the door and I walked down those 14 stairs like I was walking into a bakery. He was standing in the dining room when I came in. Face red. Not pink. Red, that specific shade I'd seen exactly twice before, both times involving Katie and a car. My mother had both hands flat on the table like she was holding it down. Katie stood frozen in the kitchen doorway with one hand on her belly. And the computer monitor was glowing from the study door, and even from where I stood I could read it. "Account locked." "What did you do?" he said. I kept my voice completely level. "I'm not sure what you're asking me." "The account. I can't get into the account. I changed the password on August 9th. You can't just, I turned 21 on August 3rd. And then I said the sentence I had practiced in my car more times than I've practiced anything in my life. Dad, in Illinois, a UTMA custodianship ends when the beneficiary turns 21. It's 760 ILCS 20, Section 21. On my birthday, that account stopped being yours to manage and became mine to own. That's not my opinion. That's the statute. My mother's voice cracked. But we just talked about this at dinner. You said okay. And I looked at her. I said okay to hearing your plan, Mom. I never said I'd hand over an account that legally belongs to me. My father's hands were shaking. I'd never seen that before either. That money came from your grandmother. It was for this family. And that's when I walked to the coat closet by the front door. I'd put the folder in there when I came in. Under my jacket, behind the vacuum, where nobody in that house has looked since 1996. I carried it back to the dining room table and I set it down on the wood. 2 inches thick. Navy blue. No, Dad, I said. It came from Grandma Eleanor. For my education. Specifically. In writing. And I opened it. Document 1. The gift letter. Dated March 14, 2003. Notarized, with the seal you can feel with your thumb. I read it out loud. I didn't raise my voice. I read it the way you'd read a recipe. I, Eleanor Margaret Pruitt, hereby gift the sum of $50,000 to my granddaughter, Rachel Ann Dunham, to be held in custodial trust under the Illinois Uniform Transfers to Minors Act. This gift is irrevocable. These funds are designated solely for Rachel's higher education. Upon her attaining the age of 21, full control shall transfer to Rachel. Document 2. A printout of the statute. One line highlighted in yellow. The custodian shall transfer the custodial property to the minor on the minor's attaining 21 years of age. I put my finger on one word. Shall, I said. Not may. Shall. There's no discretion in that sentence. There's no version of that sentence where you get a vote. Document 3. The confirmation email. August 9, 2017. Transfer complete. Custodial account closed. Individual brokerage account opened. Sole owner, Rachel A. Dunham. My father stared at those 3 pieces of paper for a long, long time. And my mother whispered, "You planned this." And I said the truest thing I said all night. "No, Mom. I prepared for it. You're the ones who made it happen." Nobody said anything for maybe 15 seconds. Katie was crying in the doorway. My father sat down slowly in a dining room chair like his legs had quit on him. And here's what I didn't tell them that night. I didn't tell them about the email chain I hadn't found yet, the one from 2014 where my father wrote to the brokerage and asked, in writing, whether he could use my account for family expenses. And they told him no. And he did it anyway 10 days later. I didn't tell them about the $14,720, because in September of 2017 I still didn't know it existed. That was coming. But first I need to take you back. Because if you think this started at that dinner table, you don't understand this story at all. This started when I was 8 years old, over a piano lesson. Like this if you've ever had to prove something in your own family that should have never needed proving. 8 years old. The piano. Fall of 2004. Katie wanted piano lessons because a girl in her class took them. My mother sat at the kitchen table with a phone book open and called around and found a woman on Bailey Road who charged $110 a month. Katie started that following Tuesday. 9 days later, I asked if I could take the Saturday art class at the rec center. $70 for the whole session. Not per month. For the whole thing. My mother smiled at me and said, "Maybe next year, honey. We just committed to your sister's piano." I said, "But it's cheaper." And she said, and I remember this in her exact voice, "Katie needs a little more support than you do, sweetheart. You do fine all by yourself." I was 8. I didn't have the words for what that was. But I never forgot it. Not one day of my life. Katie quit piano in February. 9 years old. The wreck. I was 9 and I was sitting on the third step from the bottom in a pair of pajamas with strawberries on them, because the third step was the spot where you could hear the kitchen but nobody could see you. Katie had wrecked her car that afternoon. Rear-ended somebody on Route 59 because she was texting. Nobody got hurt. The car was totaled. And I heard my mother say, the deductible's $6,400, Ray. We don't have that sitting anywhere. And my father said, what about Rachel's account? Your mother put 50 in there. It's for school, but this is temporary. We'll put it back. Long silence. Then my mother said, it's for transportation to school, technically. We could write it that way. We could write it that way. And my father said, okay. I'll call in the morning. I went back upstairs and I lay in bed and I felt something cold settle into my chest, and I have never been able to fully get it out since. The next morning at breakfast, Katie got pancakes. I got cereal. Nobody said one word about the car and nobody said one word about the money. 14 years old. The dropout. August 2010, Katie started at Illinois State. Tuition, room, and board came to $19,100 for the fall semester. She made it to the second week of November. Came home for Thanksgiving break and never went back. Said it wasn't for her. Said the pressure was too much. And here's what my parents said. My mother, that's okay, sweetie. You'll figure it out. My father, nothing wrong with taking a break. Nobody, and I mean nobody, said the number out loud. $19,100, and the family reaction was a shrug and a plate of leftovers. I was 14. I was sitting at my desk doing algebra homework. And $80, not important. Brett cheated on her in March of 2015. Wedding called off. The venue kept every penny of the deposit because they'd passed the 12-month refund window. $9,000. Gone. For a wedding that never happened. And in April, at breakfast, I asked one question. 1. I said, do you think there's any chance the venue would refund part of it? Because I've got college visits coming up and, my father exploded. First and only, I got into the University of Illinois in 2015. Good aid package. Scholarship covered $29,000. Work study covered another $6,000. That left about $10,000 a year in gaps, housing, fees, books, food, the stuff nobody puts on the brochure. I emailed my parents in April with the whole package attached. My father wrote back, congratulations, kiddo. We're so proud of you. I wrote back, thank you. So we'd need to figure out about $10,000 a year for the gap. I can work summers, but I wanted to talk it through. He wrote, let's talk when you're home. We never talked. Not once. Not that summer, not that Christmas, not ever. I brought it up twice and both times it slid off the table like water off a windshield. So I worked. Front desk at the rec center, 5 in the morning shifts. Tutoring freshmen in economics. Research assistant for a professor who paid me $11 an hour to enter data. Summers the first waited tables at a place off Route 34 and pulled $10,000 a season. $40,000 over 4 years. I covered every dime of it myself. My parents contributed $0. And I want to be precise about that, because I don't say it to be dramatic. $0. Not a check, not a care package, not a tank of gas. Meanwhile, Katie lived at home. Rent-free. They covered her car insurance. Her phone. Her health insurance until she aged off it. Sophomore year, I came home for Thanksgiving completely gray in the face, working 26 hours a week on top of 18 credit hours. And my mother looked at me across the table and said, and she said it warmly, she said it like a compliment, see, Ratch? You didn't even need that education fund. Look at you. You're doing just fine. And you know what? She was right. I was fine. I was fine because I had never once in my life been given the option not to be. Senior year, I did something on a Tuesday night in the library that changed the direction of my entire life. I pulled up my ledger document, and next to it I pulled up IRS Publication 970, the one that covers education-related accounts and distributions. And I started matching them up. Every memo line my father had ever typed. Transportation. Educational materials. Medical, beneficiary. And what I figured out that night, sitting in a study corral at 11:40 at night with a highlighter in my hand, was this: a custodian is only allowed to spend that money on things that directly benefit the kid whose name is on the account. Not the family. Not the household. The kid. Which means every dollar that went somewhere else wasn't just unfair. It was a taxable event. With a penalty attached. And back interest running from the year it happened. I printed that page. I highlighted it. I put it in the back of the folder. And I never showed it to a soul. Not for 8 years. Comment, receipts, if you want me to break down that exact IRS section line by line in part 2, because I've used it 11 times now and I've never once had to actually file it. The threat does the work. Then, on August 2, 2017, the day before my 21st birthday, my mother sent me that text. That money is for this family, sweetheart. We take care of each other. That's what love is. I read it standing in line at a Jewel-Osco holding a basket with milk and a rotisserie chicken in it. And I want to tell you what I felt, because it surprised me. It wasn't rage. It wasn't grief. It was relief. Because for 11 years I had been carrying around a suspicion I couldn't prove and couldn't say out loud without sounding paranoid and ungrateful. And she had just put it in writing. She'd handed me the evidence in a text message with a heart emoji at the end of it. I paid for the chicken. I sat in my car in that parking lot. And I called a man named Harold Bishop. Harold was 68 years old, and he drafted my grandmother's gift letter in 2003. And I found his number because it was printed at the bottom of the last page. He remembered her immediately. Eleanor Pruitt, he said. Sharp woman. Very particular about her language. I sat in his office on Washington Street 2 weeks later, on August 8, filing cabinets. Old paper smell. Coffee that had been on the burner since the Clinton administration. He pulled the file. It was tabbed. Pruitt/Dunham, UTMA, 2003. And he read the gift letter out loud in a voice like a man reading scripture. Then he looked up at me over his glasses. Ms. Dunham, what exactly is it you're worried about? And I said, I'm worried my father is going to try to move that money before I can stop him. Harold didn't blink. He said, then let me tell you what your grandmother did. She used the word shall. Do you understand what that means? I said I thought so. It means your father has no authority. Not limited authority, none. On your birthday, his role ends by operation of law. If he moves $1 after that date, it isn't a family disagreement. It's conversion of property. Then he leaned back and said the sentence that actually mattered. But Rachel, prevention beats litigation every single time. Don't wait for him to do something wrong so you can be right about it. Take the account before he thinks to. File the transfer request yourself, on your birthday, before you tell anyone. And change your contact information first. Every address, every phone number, every email on that account. So the notices come to you and not to his mailbox. I had already done that part. August 3rd. My birthday. From my apartment, on my laptop, before I'd even had breakfast. Changed the mailing address to Evanston. Changed the phone to my cell. Changed the email. Harold actually laughed. Your grandmother would have liked you, he said. I filed the transfer request on August 9th. 6 business days later the confirmation came through, and I read it in the stairwell of my apartment. After that night, I didn't go home for 11 weeks. I buried myself in first year. Contracts. Torts. Civil procedure. 100 pages of reading a night, every night, until my eyes felt sanded. I found a study group, Marcus, Priya, and a guy named Dev who'd grown up in a house not that different from mine. One night in November, over cheap Thai food on Marcus's floor, I told them the whole story. Marcus said, "Did you give it to them?" I said, "No. And now we barely talk." And Priya said, "Good." That was the first time in my life somebody had heard the whole thing and said good instead of well, they're still your parents. Then, in January of 2018, I did something I'd been circling for months. I requested my complete transaction history. Not 5 years. Not 10. All of it. Back to account opening, March 2003. It came on January 22nd. 61 pages. My apartment was 340 square feet with one window facing a brick wall. The overhead light buzzed like a fly in a jar. I cleared the floor and I laid all 61 pages out in a grid, and I sat down cross-legged in the middle of it, and I went line by line with a red pen. The original deposit. $50,000. Eleanor Margaret Pruitt. March 14, 2003. Growth over 14 years, steady. Nothing dramatic. About 3.6% a year after fees. Then the withdrawals. I knew about 2007. 6,400. Memo, transportation, beneficiary. The car. But there were 2 more on those pages that I had never seen. Not once. Not ever. June 11, 2011. $3,520. Memo, medical expense, beneficiary. I was 14 years old in June of 2011. I had no procedures. No emergency room. No braces. Nothing. I had a physical for volleyball that cost a $25 copay. August 3, 2014. $4,800. Memo, educational materials, beneficiary. That was 3 weeks before my senior year of high school. I bought used textbooks that year from a girl on my street for $60 and a promise to babysit. 6,400. 3,520. 4,800. $14,720. Every single memo line was a lie. In writing. With my name on it. And then I got to page 38. Page 38 was an email chain the brokerage had included in the records, because it was attached to the account file. My father, writing to their support desk. July 22, 2014. I am the custodian on a UTMA account for my daughter. Can I withdraw funds for family expenses? The beneficiary would benefit indirectly from the family's overall financial stability. Their reply. Next morning. Custodial funds may only be used for the direct benefit of the named beneficiary, education, health, maintenance, or support of that individual. Indirect benefit through general family circumstances does not qualify. We recommend you consult an attorney before proceeding. And my father's response, the whole thing, 4 words, understood. Thank you. 12 days later, the $4,800 came out. Labeled educational materials. For me. I read that chain out loud 3 times to an empty apartment. My voice was shaking so bad by the 3rd time I could barely get through it. He asked. They told him no. He wrote understood. And then he did it anyway and put my name on it. That's not a mistake. A mistake is when you don't know. He knew. He asked, specifically, so he would know. And then he decided the answer didn't apply to him. Then I found one more thing, and this one is the one that actually put me on the floor. Buried in the paperwork was a reference to Katie's account. She had one too. Grandma Eleanor opened both, same day, same amount. $50,000 each. She was fair down to the dollar. Katie's account had $1,100 left in it in 2007. They drained hers first. Every dollar. And when hers was empty, they came to mine. I wasn't the account they raided. I was the second account. The reserve tank. The backup. And I sat there on that floor, in that ugly buzzing light, surrounded by 61 pages, and I cried for about 40 minutes. Not sad crying. I've thought about this a lot and I know the difference now. It was the crying you do when the story you've been told your whole life finally cracks open and the real one falls out. Then I photographed every page. Every memo line, every email. I saved it to an encrypted drive and I backed the drive up in 2 places. Because I finally had the one thing I'd needed since I was 9 years old on that 3rd step. Not feelings. Proof. If you've ever found out your family lied to you about money, type proof in the comments. I want you to see how many people are typing it with you. My niece was born on February 27, 2018. Lily Ann. 7 pounds, 1 ounce. My mother texted me at 11:20 in the morning. She's here. Healthy and perfect. Can you come? I was in the middle of a property law lecture on adverse possession, which, if you know the doctrine, is the law of how you can end up owning something just by holding on to it long enough while nobody stops you. I stared at that text until the words went soft. I texted back at 2:30. Congratulations. I'm in class until 5. I'll try to come Saturday. She wrote, this weekend, Ratch. The first days are special. I wrote, I have a torts midterm Monday. Saturday afternoon. Edward Hospital. Room 214. Katie looked wrecked. Hair up in a knot, eyes swollen, that 1,000-yard stare new mothers get. Lily was in the little plastic bassinet with her fists up by her ears. Cody wasn't there. He was at work. We all knew what that meant and nobody said it. I'd brought a bag from Target. Onesies, a blanket, a little hat. $80-some I absolutely did not have. My mother said, isn't she beautiful? I said she was perfect. And I meant that too. I asked if I could hold her. They set her in my arms and she weighed nothing at all. Her eyes came open for about 2 seconds, that dark newborn blue that isn't really a color yet, and then closed again. And something came apart in my chest. Not anger. Not jealousy. Something else. I leaned down close to her ear so quiet nobody else in that room heard a word of it, and I said, you are never going to have to earn love by being easy. I promise you that. I held her for maybe 4 minutes. Then I handed her back and I said I had to study. I drove back toward the city and I got about 11 miles before I had to pull off at a gas station on Ogden and sit there with the engine running. And I cried harder than I had on that apartment floor. Not for Lily. Lily was fine. Lily had a whole life in front of her. I cried for a 9-year-old in strawberry pajamas sitting on a step in the dark, doing math about a car she didn't wreck. Cody left in April. Just gone. Katie was alone with a 6-week-old. My mother left me a voicemail. Your sister needs family right now, Rachel. Could you at least call her? I texted Katie, I'm really sorry about Cody. If you need something practical, tell me and I'll see what I can do. She answered 2 days later. I thought you of all people would understand. Guess I was wrong. I read that text about 30 times. You of all people. Because I was the one who'd been abandoned by that family, so I was supposed to have extra to give. That June, my parents took out a personal loan. $38,000 at 8.9%. $780-some a month for 5 years. My mother texted, if there's any way you could help, we are really stretched thin. I wrote back, I'm working 2 jobs to make rent, Mom. I'm stretched thin too. That wasn't entirely true. I had money. But it was my money. And there's a difference, and it took me until I was 22 years old to learn how to say that sentence without apologizing after it. By that December, Katie and Lily had moved back into the house. My parents were in their 60s raising a baby while my sister looked for work. I came home for Christmas for one day. I stayed at a hotel by the highway. Dinner lasted an hour and 10 minutes. My father looked 5 years older than he had in September. My mother served ham instead of the roast, because ham is cheaper. And the porch light was on. For Katie's car. Not for mine. I graduated in May 2021. Virtual ceremony, because of everything. When they read my name, Rachel and Dunham, cum laude, my study group all screamed on a Zoom call and Marcus held a beer up to his webcam. My parents texted, "So proud of you." I answered 6 hours later. "Thank you." I passed the bar in October. My father's text said, "Knew you'd make it. You always do. You always do." Yeah, Dad. Because I was never once allowed to find out what happens if I don't. I started at a legal aid organization in Chicago in the fall of 2021. Family Law Division. $56,000 a year and a desk in a room with 9 other desks. My first real case came in February. A 23-year-old named Yesenia. Her uncle had died and left her $78,000, and her parents were in court trying to claim it. Their argument, in writing, in a legal filing, was, family emergency. I stood up in that courtroom, 25 years old, in a suit I'd bought secondhand, and I said, "Your Honor, the will names Yesenia Reyes as the sole beneficiary. The decedent's language is unambiguous. The instrument says what it says." An opposing counsel stood up and said, "Your Honor, this is a question of family values. The respondent is being selfish." And I said, "No, Your Honor. This is a question of a signed document." We won. Afterward, out in the hallway, Yesenia hugged me and she was shaking and she said, "I really thought I was being selfish." And I held onto her shoulders and I said, "You're not selfish. You're protecting something that already belongs to you. That's not selfishness. That's survival." Over the next 4 years I handled 43 of those cases. I won 39. Every single one felt personal, because every single one was personal. Every time I sat across from a 24-year-old with a folder in her lap and shaking hands, I was sitting across from myself at 21. In 2024 I made senior attorney. $76,000 a year and an office with an actual window. And on the wall behind my desk, I hung my grandmother's gift letter in a black frame. When a client starts crying and says maybe I'm being greedy, I don't argue with her. I just turn around and point at it. "See that? Your grandmother wrote that down. In ink. In front of a notary. That's not a feeling. That's the law." In October of 2025, a legal trade publication ran a feature called Rising Voices in Family Law. I was in it. The piece said, "Dunham has built a practice on a deceptively simple principle, that written instruments mean what they say." With a 91% success rate, she has protected more than $4 million in assets for clients whose own families attempted to claim money that was never legally theirs. There was a line at the end that I gave them off the cuff, and I didn't think much about it when I said it. In my experience, the most effective weapon a family has isn't the law. It's love. Love is what they use when the law is against them. That article got shared about 14,000 times. And on December 4, 2025, at 7:40 in the evening, my phone rang. It was my mother. And her voice was shaking so badly I almost didn't recognize it. "Rachel." I read the article. Long pause. "Can we sit down? In person? Please?" I said, "Why now?" And she said something I had waited 8 years and 4 months to hear. "Because I read the part about love. And I think I finally understand what we did to you." A coffee shop on Jefferson Avenue. Corner table by the window. December 9, 2025. 3 cups already on the table when I walked in. Mine was a medium latte, still hot. They remembered. 8 years of almost nothing, and they remembered how I take my coffee. That undid me more than anything either of them said that whole hour. My father looked small. That's the only word for it. He'd been a big presence my whole life, not tall, just loud in a room, and now he was a gray man in a coat that didn't fit right anymore, with his hands wrapped around a cup for the warmth. My mother's hands were shaking. She kept pressing them flat on the table to stop it. We read it, my father said. The article. Okay. For $1 million, my mother said. You protect people whose families try to take their money. And then she said it. The sentence. Like we tried to take yours. First time in 8 years, 4 months, and 15 days that anybody in my family had said that sentence out loud. I didn't help her with it. I let it sit there on the table between the 3 cups. My father cleared his throat. We didn't know it would hurt you like it did, Rachel. We honestly thought you were strong enough to handle it. And I let the silence go a long time before I answered him. I was strong enough, Dad. That's the problem. I was strong enough to see exactly what you were doing while you were doing it. Strong enough to change the password 6 weeks before you asked me for a dime. Strong enough to print out a statute and drive it to your dinner table in a folder. Strong enough to walk out of that house and build an entire life without ever once waiting for either of you to tell me I'd done a good job. You didn't ask me to be strong. You spent that strength. And you spent it on somebody else. My mother started crying. Quietly, into a napkin, the way she cries. We were desperate. Katie was pregnant, Cody was gone, we had nothing left. You had something left in 2007, I said. And 2011. And 2014. My father shifted in his chair. That was for the family. You benefited from that. Indirectly. And I want you to understand, I did not plan what I did next. I had thought about it for 8 years, but standing there in that moment, I honestly wasn't sure I was going to do it. I took out my phone. I opened a photo. And I turned the screen around and set it on the table facing him. Page 38. Indirect benefit through general family circumstances does not qualify. We recommend you consult an attorney before proceeding. And underneath it, in his own words, understood. Thank you. I said, you asked them, Dad. In writing. They told you no. You wrote back understood. And 12 days later you took $4,800 and you typed my name on the memo line. His face went the color of the napkin. $14,720, I said. Across 3 withdrawals. Every one of them labeled as something I needed. I never saw a penny of any of it and I never knew it happened until I was 22 years old and sitting on my apartment floor. My mother whispered, we always thought we'd put it back. You never did. And right then the door opened and the cold came in with it. Katie walked in with Lily on her hip. Lily was 7. Pigtails. A puffy purple coat with the hood hanging down her back. She had my mother's chin, which was a strange thing to notice in that particular moment. Katie sat down without asking. She looked older than 34. Her hands were rough. I read it too, Ratch, she said. I didn't know about the 14,000. Not until Mom told me on the phone last night. Her voice cracked in half. I thought it was just the big one. The 92. I didn't know Dad had been, she couldn't finish it. And I looked at my sister. I really looked at her, for the first time in a long time. And I said the gentlest hard thing I've ever said to anybody. You didn't ask questions, Katie. For 20 years. Because you didn't want the answers. She flinched like I'd touched a bruise. And then she said, you're right. That's the first time in my life my sister ever agreed with me about anything that cost her something. Then my father did the last thing he had left. His voice dropped and got hard. Rachel. This is family business. If you keep putting this out in public, in articles, with your name attached, we may have to talk to a lawyer. Defamation. Slander. And I smiled. Not a mean smile. An almost affectionate one, honestly. Because it was so him. Dad, I said. I am a lawyer. Then I opened one more thing on my phone. IRS Publication 970. Section 5. Highlighted in yellow since 2019. And I read it to him at a normal conversational volume, the way you'd read a menu. A distribution from a custodial account that is not for the direct benefit of the named beneficiary is a taxable event. The custodian is liable for the resulting tax, plus penalties and accrued interest from the year of the distribution. Then I did the math out loud. Slowly. In a coffee shop. With the espresso machine going behind me. 2007, 6,400. 10% penalty is 640, plus 18 years of interest. 3,520. Penalty 352, plus 14 years. 4,800. Penalty 480, plus 11 years. I looked up. Conservatively. You are looking at somewhere north of $4,000 in penalties, plus back taxes on every dollar, plus whatever they decide to do about 3 memo lines that don't match reality. Want me to walk you through the worksheet? He went completely white. Katie whispered, Dad. Could you actually get audited? My mother put her hand over her mouth. And for the first time in 8 years, that table was completely, totally silent. The truth wasn't in a navy blue folder anymore. It was out in the air. In front of my sister. In front of a 7-year-old drinking hot chocolate. My father spoke first, and his voice had nothing left in it. If there's anything we can do. Financially. To make it, I don't want your money. I said it flat. No heat in it at all. I make $76,000 a year. I own my condo. I have savings and a retirement account and a will. I'm fine, Dad. I've been fine since I was 22, and I got there without $1 from either of you. My mother said, then what do you want from us? And that was the question. That was the whole thing, right there. Honesty, I said. That's it. That's the entire list. Honesty, and the right to decide what this looks like going forward. Me. Not you. She reached across the table for my hand. I let her take it. I didn't squeeze back. But I let her take it. And then a small voice from the end of the table said, Are you Aunt Rachel? Lily. Chocolate on her upper lip. Looking at me like I was a rumor she was finally confirming. And I felt every piece of armor I'd spent 8 years welding together just slide right off. Yeah, sweetheart, I said. I'm Aunt Rachel. Mommy says you're a lawyer. I am. That's cool. Thanks, Lily. Then I turned to my sister. I'll send birthday cards. Real ones. And maybe we get lunch sometime. Just the 3 of us. You, me, and her. Katie was crying again, but different this time. I'd like that, she said. My father tried once more, at the door, with his coat half on. We thought we were protecting the family, Rachel. And I said the last thing I said to my father that day. No, Dad. You protected Katie. You spent me. Those are not the same thing, and I need you to stop calling them the same thing. My mother said, I'm so sorry, Rachel. We failed you. And I looked at both of them and I told them the truth. I know. And I survived it anyway. I walked out into the cold. No hug. No big scene. No music swelling. Just a 30-year-old woman on a sidewalk in December feeling about 40 pounds lighter than she had an hour before. People ask me all the time if I ever forgave them. And I've come to believe that's the wrong question. Forgiveness means I was standing around waiting for them to earn something back. I wasn't waiting. I was building. There's a difference, and it's the whole difference. I was building a life where their approval wasn't a currency I needed. Building a career out of handing other people the same statute that saved me. Building a boundary that can't be guilt-tripped, cried over, or prayed away. They thought moving my future to my sister was a family decision. It wasn't a family decision. It was theft. Legal-sounding theft, wrapped in a hug, justified by an emergency, and delivered by people who genuinely believed they were being good parents. That's the part nobody wants to hear. Most of them aren't villains. They're just running a script somebody handed them, and they never once stopped to read it. My grandmother left that money for my education. I used it exactly the way Eleanor Pruitt intended, down to the last dollar. I graduated with no debt. I built something. And now I spend my working life making sure other people's grandmothers get the same respect. Being the responsible one does not make you disposable. It makes you dangerous, if you know what you're owed, if you write it down, and if you're willing to be the only person at the table who isn't crying. 2 weeks after that coffee, I hung one more thing on my office wall. Right next to my grandmother's gift letter, I pinned up the penalty calculation. The one I did on a napkin. The one I never sent to anybody and never will. Not as a threat. As a reminder. That the day I stopped needing them to be sorry was the day I actually got free. And listen, one last thing, and this one's small, but it's the one I think about most. The Christmas after that coffee, I drove out to Naperville. First time in years. And when I turned onto that street at 9 o'clock at night, the porch light was on. For me. 8 years and 4 months. That's how long it took. My name is Rachel Dunham. I'm 30 years old. And I built my entire life on ground nobody could take back, because I wouldn't hand them the shovel. Now here's what's coming in part 2. I'm going to walk you through the exact 9-page folder I build with every single client. How to request your complete transaction history all the way back to the day the account opened. It's one phone call and most people don't know they're entitled to it. How to spot a fraudulent memo line and flag it. And how to write the demand letter that has made custodians back down in under 48 hours, 11 times, without ever setting foot in a courtroom. Over $4 million protected with that exact process. If you want it, hit subscribe right now so you don't miss it, because I'm dropping it next week. Comment legal folder, and I'll pin the link to the free template at the top of the comments. And if you've ever been told that being capable means you don't get to need anything, send this video to somebody who needs to hear it tonight. Not tomorrow. Tonight. Because your future is not a family asset. Your ability to survive is not a reason to make you. And choosing yourself is not selfish. It never was. I'm Rachel Dunham.